Spidey enters the fourth challenge against the Scions of Cyttorak when he faces off against Cyra, the Inevitability of Death, as Spider-Man must find a way to face the meaninglessness of life. Can he overcome overwhelming grief in time to win the next challenge? Let's find out in our review of Amazing Spider-Man number 65 from Marvel Comics. See you in 3. Welcome back to Comical Opinions. Before we dig into the current issue, how about a quick recap? When last we left the wall crawler in Amazing Spider-Man number 64, he faced the next Scion of Cyttorak, Calyx, aka the Inevitability of Pain. Spidey had to stop Calyx's demon dogs from eating citizens on the street while evading Calyx's attacks. Ultimately, Spider-Man defeated Calyx by banishing his demon dogs back to their dimension and easily whooping Calyx's butt in a fistfight. So Calyx really relied on his dogs to do all the fighting, but he's not so great in a one-on-one battle. The issue concluded with Calyx yielding, Spider-Man not dying, surprisingly everyone around us, and Calyx's twin sister Cyra stepping up for the next challenge. And that brings us to the current issue. In Amazing Spider-Man number 65, Spider-Man commences his next challenge against Cyra, the Inevitability of Death. Her slightly older twin brother, Calyx, is down and out, maybe, but she commences anyway saying he's done, don't worry about it, we're just going to move on. What's his challenge with Cyra? She gives him a sphere, and all he has to do is hold it. If he sets it down, he loses. You might think to yourself, well, that's pretty easy. Well, no, it's not quite that simple. First, Calyx is still threatening to continue fighting from the previous challenge, so there's a little bit of tension there. Second, the sphere shows Spidey the truth of death all across the world, starting with his friends and family. As Spider-Man holds the sphere, he starts to see visions of things that may come to pass, but he still sees them as though they are real. In some future reality, for example, Aunt May dies after succumbing to the effects of another global pandemic called the Essex virus. Mary Jane Watson, fighting as Jackpot, dies during a heated battle against Hobgoblin. J. Jonah Jameson dies in his office from a brain embolism. And Randy Robertson dies in a stampede when a housing crisis protest turns violent. The issue rambles on and on and on, showing snippets of all the people that Spidey has ever associated with, at least in the last 5 or 10 years, all of them dying in terrible, in some cases peaceful, and in most cases meaningless ways. After the first few visions, Spidey dismisses the visions as just emo fanfic, and he says that directly to Cyra. He says, I've seen death in all forms and factors and shapes and sizes. This isn't going to work on me. But as the weight of each death flashes before his eyes, the tragic meaninglessness of each death takes an emotional toll, and each death scene he sees, Phil Coulson, now the Angel of Death, arriving to claim Spidey's family one by one. As the visions of death begin to pile high, Spidey tries to leap into the vision and stop Coulson, but death, as they say, is inevitable. Despite the crushing realization that all deaths are meaningless to some degree, Spidey holds on to the sphere. Suddenly, Calyx attacks Spidey because he refused to yield in the prior challenge. The issue ends with death coming for Spider-Man, which is to be expected, a meager pep talk from Phil Coulson, who is now the Angel of Death, and Peter deciding there's no point in fighting if life is meaningless. Hey, do you want to be part of our growing community and get exclusive perks? Become a channel member today. By becoming a member, you'll support a channel you love, which is ours because everybody loves it, but you'll also gain access to special badges, emojis, and members-only content. Click the join button below to become part of our family and help us create more of the content you enjoy. Now let's get back to the review. Well, that's the synopsis, so let's talk about first impressions, art, positives, negatives, what have you. Amazing Spider-Man number 65, I think on the whole, is a mixed bag. On the one hand, writer Joe Kelly gives readers a view into possible futures to create interesting fodder for speculation about stories that may or may not happen. That's always fun. You like to dig into those and figure out how did you get from A to B and imagine all the stories that could make that possible future possible. On the other hand, the wonky, fluid rules of the challenge are really becoming an increasing source of frustration. It's annoying when every challenge seems to have a different set of rules and nobody seems to want to adhere to them. Let's switch gears for a second and talk about the art. Cafu steps in as the guest artist, and the results are pretty darn good. I haven't personally seen Cafu since he worked on Christopher Cantwell's abysmal Iron Man run, and I say abysmal from the perspective of the writing, not the art, because the art was pretty great. Here, it looks like Cafu hasn't missed a step. Amazing Spider-Man number 65 is very light on action, but heavy on the emotion as Spidey witnesses one heartbreaking death after another, and they start to pile up. So Cafu pulls off the emotional weight and beats with a pretty expert touch, and all that pressure is on him to make it work and to sell it. All right, let's switch over to the positives and negatives, starting with what's great about Amazing Spider-Man number 65. The highlight of this issue is in the snippets of future events that may or may not come to pass. You find yourself asking questions like, when does Aunt May marry J. Jonah? That's implied here. Does the Hobgoblin really return because he was the one that kills Jackpot in some future reality? Will Nathaniel Essex, aka Mr. Sinister, really unleash a plague on the world? Who knows? That may happen, may not. It sounds like something he would do, so who knows? The fun in comic shop talk is in the speculation, so Joe Kelly gives you plenty to chew on in this issue. That brings us to the negatives and what's not great about Amazing Spider-Man. This challenge, specifically the loose interpretation of rules surrounding it, is, I don't know, dog poopy. Why is Doctor Strange stubbornly withholding information about the challenge when Spidey asks him? What does he have to gain from being coy or being vague or being mysterious? There's no point to it. If he's going to die and if the world is going to end if he fails, why withhold that information? How can one Scion start a challenge fight when the prior Scion may or may not have yielded or yielded but chose to get back into it again? That doesn't make any sense. Why does each Scion have a different set of rules for victory or defeat that can be bent or broken on a whim? And why do those rules never clearly communicated in advance? This issue does it a little bit better because Cyra does say up front, this is how you win, this is how you lose, but only after Spidey asks him. If you go back to the previous fight with Calyx, none of that happens. It's just a fight. Much like Peter's mentality at the end of this issue, you're generally going to be left wondering by the end, what's the point of the challenge if it's all just meaningless anyway? So final thoughts, what do we think about Amazing Spider-Man number 65? It pits Spidey against the next Scion of Cyttorak in a challenge that threatens to break his spirit rather than his body. Joe Kelly creates a basket full of Easter eggs about future outcomes that may or may not come to pass, and that's a lot of fun in that concept. And it's all wrapped in an emotionally weighty script because Spidey has to deal with the grief of all his friends and loved ones passing on in sometimes terrible ways. Plus, Cafu's artwork is first class. That said, it's the challenge that's the problem. The rules, or lack thereof, for the challenge are getting really ridiculous at this point. If they couldn't bother to sit down and map it all out, I don't know why they even bothered to come up with the concept of a challenge in the first place. Therefore, Amazing Spider-Man number 65 earns a 6.2 out of 10. I want to like this series. I think there's a concept here and an idea here that has merit, but just the foundation is where this entire miniseries is fouling up. You have a challenge with vaguely defined rules, with vaguely defined outcomes, and the players are just not interacting in a way that makes any sense. I mean, it still doesn't make sense why Doctor Doom wouldn't tap Doctor Strange to fight this in the first place, because he's done it before. That's my opinion. What do you think? Are you enjoying this miniseries? Do you like where the 8S arc is going? Leave a thumbs up if you found the review helpful, and drop a comment below with what you think Joe Kelly, who is now going to be the main writer in Amazing Spider-Man here in a few months, what he should be doing next as far as types of challenges or types of adventures Spider-Man should be engaging in. And of course, the big question is, what do you think his relationship is going to be with Mary Jane? Also, remember to click on the link in the description to read the written review, check out the variant covers and preview pages, and buy this comic to help support the channel. Of course, your support is greatly appreciated, especially if you hit that like and subscribe below. That would be great. So thank you very much for joining, and stay tuned through the outro for more reviews just like this one.